This is the Whaingaroa Harbour near Raglan. Just 20 years ago, this used to be one of the dirtiest harbours in New Zealand. Now it's one of the cleanest and healthiest. I wanted to find out how a small community could make such a huge change, so I went to speak to Whaingaroa Harbour Care to find out their secret. This is Fred. G'day Fred. Fred's been running this project since it began in 1990. Now him and his team have planted 60% of the catchment with over 1.5 million trees going in. I caught up with them at the Whaingaroa Harbour Care native tree nursery just out of Raglan.
Here in Raglan, it was very obvious that we needed to look after our most precious resource in our book, and that is the harbour. The harbour was, in the 90s, was full of mud. It wasn't really a fishery, or a harbour as in harbouring small fish and working as nature intended. So what we decided to do was to open a native plant nursery and offer farmers who wanted to set aside areas around the harbour and streams and wetlands. We would offer them free plants and a planting service.
So free trees and free labour. Who wouldn't want a bit of that action? But the Raglan farming community just didn't bite.
We sort of expected farmers would come in their droves to get free plants and a planting service, but 5 years on, no one showed up. So we changed tact, and we're standing on at the moment the Whaingaroa Reserve, which is a farm park, and it's run by the Waikato District Council. And we asked the Waikato District Council if we could demonstrate on their farm park as to what our vision was, and they said yes, fine. We will form a community group to run the farm park, and on that committee we'll have some farmers and tangata whenua, one of the iwi, and councillor, etc. And then over the next 5 years we demonstrated on the Whaingaroa Reserve what our vision was, and that was kind of what you're looking at now, is to plant riparian plants all around the wetlands, around the streams and the coastal escarpment. And it turned out that the farm wasn't run particularly well. It was only running 70 head of stock, but after retiring a third of the farm, we ended up doubling the stock units. So it went from 70 to 140, between 140 and 160 beef cattle it's actually running at the moment. So the farmers that were on the committee were the first to realise that this riparian treatment that we're giving the properties, which is basically planting up all these wetland areas, were benefiting them by, first off, they weren't losing stock. The stock weren't wandering into wetland areas or into the streams, etc., and drowning themselves. The second thing was that because they were wandering into swamps and stuff, drowning themselves, they couldn't graze the paddocks out properly. So increasing productivity in the paddock meant that you could put more stock units on, and therefore the farm was running way more economically than it was previously. So those farmers were the first farmers to adopt it in our catchment, and they discovered that they could increase their stock units too by 30% in most cases, and some more, yet having less of an impact on the receiving environment. So it started to take off from there.
So by simply planting native trees along the waterways, it's improving the freshwater quality, the harbour, and even the economy. Sounds almost too good to be true. But how can you be sure that it's actually working?
Way back in the 90s, our harbour was the worst in New Zealand. Ministry of Fisheries did a catch per unit effort study, which is basically how many fish you can catch per hour throughout the entire North Island, and ours was one fish every 18 hours on average. So basically you had to spend 3 days to catch a fish. Now it's 3 fish an hour. So it's improved really dramatically, where even the seagrass beds were only really down to a few square metres, are now in the hectares. I think we've got something like 12 hectares at the moment. And it's all to do with what farmers have been able to achieve in stopping that sediment entering waterways.
Alright Fred, so maybe it does work. But how do I apply it to my own property? I asked Fred what trees are the best ones to start planting.
Really it's manuka, the cabbage tree, flax, and Caprosma. Caprosma robusta or karamu. You can add a few other species like the hebe, koramiko, and that's really about it for your wetland areas. But when you get into coastal areas, your species change a bit, but really it's just keeping it simple, and nature will, when the birds move in, will actually change a lot of that planting that you initially planted. You know, you'd like to put in a carry and a meadow and a totara and think that that's going to be there forever and a day, but nature will decide what it wants to grow in those particular areas. So what you initially plant 20 years on will look completely different.
There we have it. The solution to the health of our waterways lies in our commitment and passion for the environment and planting a shed load of trees. I left Whainaroa Harbour Care feeling pretty inspired, but also frustrated that such a simple solution, which benefits the environment and the economy, isn't happening in other places around New Zealand.
You need some community leaders that are prepared to get in behind what we're doing here and duplicate that elsewhere. You know, it's not an easy process, but you know, it took us really 10 years to get established before we were able to achieve anything. Now 60% of our catchment's done, and really only ever get to do it once, so we're quite honoured to be able to have made that amount of change in a 20-year period.
So good on you, Fred. You dedicated 20 years of your life to this cause, and look at the difference you've made. Now I guess it's just up to us to follow in his footsteps.